All right, welcome to this session. We are excited to have this panel discuss how to perform well in a remote interview. As I mentioned, I'm Kunal Parvedi. I'm one of the community managers of Mentor Spaces. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Randy, who's our guest moderator, who will be leading this discussion. Really excited to host this session and share insights on what makes a good remote interview. So Randy, you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you, Kunal. And thank you to the panelists for joining us today. My name is Randy Emelo, and I am the Chief Strategist here at Mentor Spaces. I have been managing the development of mentoring, virtual mentoring, I should say, through technology since its inception, actually 20 years ago. So the topic that we're going to be talking about today is very near and dear to my heart. I've been waiting for people's behavior to catch up with the technology that's been available for so long. Anyway, let's go around and let the panelists quickly introduce themselves. Let's start with Ivette and give us a quick introduction, who you are, and maybe a little bit of what your experience with remote interviewing is.
I'm Ivette, Basterrechea. I work for Casepoint. We're a technology company for lawyers providing software as a service for document reviews and productions. And I have a few roles here. I do some training, and I also am in charge of documentation here. So I have been interviewing for trainers, and I have been interviewing a lot of people for technical writing positions. So that's what's been happening for me during the pandemic.
Thank you so much. And I can see, and I'm cheating a little bit. You shared with us before the panel got started, but the wing of the aircraft behind you is a picture you just took from Spain. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Last week, Tuesday. I guess I took this Tuesday of last week. I've already been back to work for 2 days.
Yeah, welcome back. I guess the storm just hit the East Coast. So.
Yeah.
Let's go over, Matt, quickly introduce yourself and let the audience know a little bit of what your experience is on remote interviewing.
Sure. So I'm Matt Hamilton. I'm the Senior Director of Sales Engineering, also for Casepoint. So I work with Ivette for the litigation software company and technology company. My role is as the sales engineers. I work a lot with our sales department, as well as interacting with a lot of other departments corporately. But the interviews that I've done over the last, I would say even 2 years, a lot has been remote because we're a pretty decentralized company with a headquarter in DC, but people spread out. So I've done everything from our senior level sales representatives to just finished interning some interns that are in between college semesters or still in college to work for me in my department. So over the last couple of years, I've kind of talked to a little bit of everybody in the course of interviewing. And this is definitely not Spain. So
no, but it is a lovely office.
It could be, though. It could be.
It could be. That's right. It could be. We would never know the difference.
The Texas gives it away, hopefully. So.
Thanks so much, Matt. Dalit, take a moment, introduce yourself to everyone, and let us know your experience with remote interviewing.
Thank you, Randy. So I am Enterprise Fraud Risk Officer for TIAA. TIAA is a large financial services company with 15,000 employees and $1.4 trillion under management. And I oversee the fraud and misconduct program, which means that I work with, policies, procedures, framework, but more importantly, I work with my first line business partners, people who actually execute both the strategy and the day-to-day of fraud controls. So my experience with interviews in remote interviews is only as an interviewer. We've interviewed many candidates for my own team, very recently and before. I've also interviewed for other people's teams, right? So we work together with, so other people would want me to interview both internal and external interviewees, and which is actually an interesting experience to interview someone who you worked with before, who is positioning themselves for an internal position. It's kind of awkward, I think. And we also interviewed, interestingly enough, and I think it goes back to your point, Randy, we interviewed one candidate before pandemic. We tried to accommodate a candidate that we were interested in who was traveling at the time overseas. And so we interviewed them that way.
Well, that's fantastic. We certainly have the right people on the call today. Sharing just a little bit of my background, when I was in my graduate studies, my area of research and focus was leadership behavior and how leadership behavior changes in a virtualized environment versus a face-to-face. So again, this topic is something that has been a keen focus of mine for most of my my professional career. It's always good to hear the practical side though. And Dalit, you actually brought up an interesting point that interviewing isn't always something that people are doing for a new job, an outsider coming in. It could be an inside kind of a lateral move or moving around within the organizational structure in interviewing remotely. Let me get your read on this. Do you think that remote interviewing is here to stay, or is this temporary?
I think it's here to stay. It allows you to assess interviewees from all over without bearing the cost. In the past, we would have to say, well, do I really like this candidate enough to pay for his or her, travel expenses? And sometimes you're like, yeah, we'll stick with, you don't do that. You're not supposed to do that, but it's kind of, in the back of your mind. So I think, yes, we will continue to interview this way.
Yeah, Matt, what's your thought on this?
I think so. I mean, kind of going back a little bit further in time, it used to be phone interviews first before you would travel somewhere. So we didn't have the benefit of getting to see a face necessarily. Even on the interview side, you're talking to a voice that you're trying to get that job for. And I think from an expense perspective, from logistics, it gives a lot more flexibility, given that we work, just in the nature of the world we are now. A lot of people are working still remotely, or at least in the area that their company is, but maybe not in the office. But like for our company in particular, since we're spread out globally, if we want to hire somebody in India, there's no reason to fly them here and go through all that. It's just do a phone interview or a Zoom interview, and then even for me, we've interviewed people in the same city via Zoom just because it makes more sense at times. And rather than say an initial phone interview, you get a little further down the line of getting a little bit of a more sense of who they are, what their personality is, their mannerisms. So you kind of get to know the person a little bit more than just the voice and the resume credentials.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I hear you actually, Matt, speaking to some of the advantages that come with remote interviewing. So obviously there's an ease and convenience, there's less expense, as Dalit brought up and you reinforced, but then there's also this physicality. Even though it's virtualized, you do get a sense of presence. You get a sense of how that person presents or projects themselves with the camera versus just a disembodied voice, which we've all, if you've done interviewing any time at all, then when you see that person face to face, then of course it's always something different than what you imagined, and that can play for you or against you. So I think it is an advantage as well, and I really appreciate the perspective. Dalit, is it here to stay?
Definitely to stay. And
sorry.
I'd like to bring another element. Even before pandemic, and I'm actually, it's interesting that I'm on the panel with, software, right, company. In what I observed is that us, the financial industry, a little bit heavier, slower to move, I think. We still interviewed, for the most part, face-to-face or via, mostly face-to-face if we could, where I noticed the technology companies for well before pandemic had interviewed, at least the initial interviews were conducted via video. So in a way, technology was ahead of us. Now we have caught on because we've now interviewed and acquired great talent. So we've demonstrated to ourselves that it can work. So I think we will be catching on with a trend that was there before. So it's a different flavor to the question, is it here to stay? It was here before. We are catching up with it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And sorry, Ivette, is it here to stay? Are you a fan of it?
You know what, I think it is better, to Matt's point about the phone interviews, right? Because the last time I interviewed for a job, it started out as a phone interview. And there was always the expectation that it would be in person once you got through the screening call. So my question to people that are interviewing now, do they feel that because they're doing a Zoom interview, are they farther along in the process? Or what follows the initial Zoom interview? Are you interviewing, I guess, with other people via Zoom instead of, it's very personal. I think that, I'm comfortable, obviously sharing and being very open on Zoom. But it can be daunting, I think, for some people who are less extroverted, so I don't know if they're really putting their best foot forward on Zoom. It can be a little, uncomfortable. And I know this for a fact from the interviewing that I interview writers in India, okay? And they just tend to be more introverted people. And I can tell, how nervous they are. And I think if I was in person with them, I would put them at ease. Because there's things that you can do with your body language and just cues. I don't think are coming across that much in Zoom. Or you have to try very hard to make that connection over the Zoom. I just think, I wish that there was still going to be more in-person interviewing, but yeah, it may be going away.
So thank you so much, Yvette. You bring up, of course, one of the disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is the lack of actual physical presence, and it's a virtualized presence. And so that adds an extra degree of anxiety for maybe people like myself. I'm more introverted by nature. Of course, I'm a public speaker, so I've learned how to deal with that. But which comes to basically my point would be at this is that you need to practice. This is a different way of communicating, and you have to get comfortable with it, because as all the panelists said here, I believe that interactions via like we're doing today is the new norm. And even though this technology has been around for 20 years, it's still fresh and new to a lot of people. And getting comfortable with it takes some time. So my encouragement is, if you're getting ready to do some interviewing, get a mentor and do some practicing and get some good feedback. It's just like presentation skills or anything else in my experience. But let's flip it over to you. Let's hear some of, as an interviewer, because I'm hearing most of you have been on the interviewer side. From the interviewer side, what are you paying the most attention to? And how are you, as maybe Yvette brought up, how are you putting the interviewee at ease? And first of all, I think all of you want people, you want the interviewee to do the best they can, right? And so again, let's just open it up for a little bit of discussion around what are some of the things that you're really looking for, and what are you doing to try to help to put them at ease? And anyone can respond to that.
I'll take that first. So I think that it is good to Yvette's point, right? You want to put them at ease. So as an interviewee, you want to have a plan and avoid distractions, right? Lock the door, ship your kids and pets elsewhere. Make sure that nothing, distracts you, because maybe as an interviewer, right? And we've worked through Zoom remotely for a year and a half. So we are used to and less fazed by the fact that a dog barks somewhere or that a kid screams, mommy, mommy on the side. We feel comfortable with that, or more comfortable than we've ever been. The interviewee may not know that because they may be new to the workplace. So for them, it may be the end of the world. So I think that we as an interviewer, I always say, don't worry about that if technology drops, because all of this had happened before. Wi-Fi drops, kids scream. You want to tell them that you understand if that happens, such that they are focused on the interview. At the same time, I would say to the people who are interviewing with us, make sure that none of that happens as best as you can. So, and I want to share one more thing while I have the floor. I wish I made this up. I interviewed someone not too long ago who took the interview from their bedroom, which is fine, right? Their home bedroom. He was dressed up with a suit and a tie and looked very professionally, at least, what I could tell. But what I could see, as you can see now, in his back was his undone bed. This was not the reason he didn't get the job offer, but it definitely did not help. So I think that if you want to make yourself at ease and the interviewer at ease, I was distracted by his, linen that was kind of, messed up. And I am not making any of this up. So make sure that you are confident and you come forward as best as you can, and maybe, as Ivette had done here, have a nice backdrop to the interview that makes you confident in presenting who you are and how you want to be best perceived.
Great.
I hope
Thank
that's
you.
helpful.
Yeah, it's a great tip. It's some of this stuff is common sense, but you need to make a tick list of things to do to clear your space. I have my notes, things like that right here in front of me, which is, I think, an advantage for a virtual interview, is that remote interview is that you can assemble your notes and things all around you. You can set your environment up in a way that the person on the camera has a limited view, and use that advantage to make yourself comfortable, get your speaking points in front of you and things like that. Matt, what are some suggestions that you have?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dalit, because I've had that same experience. And it's not intentional, but I think for an interviewee, you do want to put your best foot forward. When you go to somebody's office and you're in their office or a conference room and you're doing the demonstration, it's their background. So it's a neutral environment for them, but for you, it's new, but they know what to expect around them. Find whatever you can. I mean, like if you're a college senior and you're part of a fraternity, you don't want a pile of beer cans sitting behind you for your interview. Just put your best foot forward, clean up a little bit. It doesn't deter from or take away from your qualifications or your personality, but it's a visual distraction for the people. And if I see an unmade bed, or if and like Dalit really eloquently said, is that we understand the issues with technology, or a kid calling out for you. That stuff happens. That's just the part of being at home. But the stuff that you can control very easily, just take care of it. Kind of get everything buttoned down and cleaned up. If you need a neutral background, find a neutral background in your house somewhere and move to a chair and put the laptop at a height that looks comfortable. It's just it presents you better and more neutral, so no distraction can take away from your abilities and your confidence. And relax, because I'll promise you every interviewer is nervous too. They know the questions they're going to ask, but they're meeting you for the first time. There's that weird exchange of, I've got to start a conversation with you. I'm going to ask you questions, but just relax, be yourself, let your personality shine through, and then your skills or your qualifications or your education or whatever will carry with it as long as you relax. And the last tip, well, I have the floor, is ask questions. Don't ask just think about creative questions. Don't ask, well, what do you like about your job? That everybody hears that one. Ask questions about, like, what's the most challenging thing that you've ever come across in your job? Or if you could have attacked a project differently, what was that project and what would you have done differently? Like, I'm fascinated by what you do with fraud claim and fraud work in financial. I would have a bazillion questions for you, because that's just fascinating. It's a fascinating area where you can go, well, what's the, like, the example you gave about an interview, but what's the most unusual thing you've seen from a fraud perspective? Obviously, without giving away any confidences, but what's interesting about the job and what made you proud about doing it? That's the kind of question I would ask, especially toward the end of the interview when they start asking you about, what do you want to know? So for what it's worth, those are kind of the tips to take away the distractions and be creative, show who you are.
Yeah, I really like that. So Matt, what I really do hear you saying very clearly is, you want to project a brand. So you want to, you stand for something, you have a set of values. What are those values? Innate curiosity is always attractive to someone who's looking to hire.
Yeah.
We're all looking for people who are able to see and think differently about common situations. So good points. Ivette, tips, suggestions?
Well, agreed on things like background and location. I always tell people, well, anybody that my friend of interview, make sure you log into the meeting a few minutes before and just check your camera and make sure you can get on, because there's nothing worse than that panic of, like, the link is not working, and trying to get the person that you're interviewing with on by email or by phone. It's bad. So you want to make sure that you can have all the technology installed that you need to access it, and that it's your profile and not like your other family member's profile, because I've had that happen too, where my husband was showing up as me because he couldn't get me off of, the Zoom. So that was bad. I think he did get that job though, but we'll see if that was the case. And I also, to address the issue of distractions and to make the interviewee feel more comfortable, I do have dogs and I do have a lot of street noise because I live in the city and I often have my windows open. So I initiate that topic to make them understand, that I'll understand if you understand, kind of thing. And then what usually happens is that you have a bonding moment where the person maybe has a dog or maybe has a small child or lived in the city. And that's what I want you to do as a biggest tip, is like really try to make a personal connection. I mean, don't tell your whole life story, but you can talk about, maybe the last interview you had or something, and always have really good questions. To Matt's point, like, make sure you are not using the same run-of-the-mill questions because it's boring for everybody. If you can really thoroughly enjoy the interview and be your best self, that's what you want to present, right? So those are my points.
Thanks, Ivette. And I know we're coming kind of close to the end here. We're going to get one more question in, and it's my softball question that I end a lot of these sessions with. How can a mentor help someone who's making, obviously searching and trying to find a new career or to switch careers within an organization with their interview skills? How can a mentor help? And anyone can start on this one.
You want to rehearse, and rehearse.
Yeah.
And I think you want to have answers to the tough questions. And, again, interviewing recently, I had a couple of really good candidates, one of whom I actually hired, who had a gap in their resume. And the question you can always expect either, oh, I see that between, and whatever months and this month you been out of the workforce, can you tell me more about it, right? A lot of people were let off, or, you want to be able to address the question before it's being asked and do so confidently and as transparently as you can. And that takes rehearsal, I think. So rehearse that a lot, I think. And one more thing that I would say that has nothing to do with the medium through which you interview is you want to make sure that the interviewers knows that you want this job. You actually are interested in this job and why it is, right? Not just like, I need a job, right? That's not, but just articulate it. Sometimes you will miss it, but if you're interested in a job and you have a passion for the company, the line of work, you want that to come across. And it's difficult, to Yvette's point before, it's difficult, with cues, physical cues. So you may need to articulate, I really want this job. I'm excited about this job. And, it's difficult to show that. So you may need to say that.
Great. Thank you so much, Dalit. Go ahead, Matt. You want to jump on this?
I think what Dalit said is dead on. But the rehearsing, what a mentor can do is interview you, help you prep, walk through the, what is a typical interview going to be like, help you get rid of nervousness as much as possible. You're going to be nervous, but get rid of as much of the extra nervousness that you don't need, and help take some of the noise off. Like even prepping what we were talking about, the visual of let's go test a Zoom, I'll mock interview you, but let's go look and see what's going to distract me as I'm your interviewer, or does the blur work if you want to use that, or whatever. I think it's good practice and good repetition. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, because interviewing is an art. I mean, being interviewed, and there's an art to it. You don't want to ever give away that you're not something that you really are. In the same breath, you want to be positive, like filling in a gap in your resume. You don't ever want to go, well, those jerks fired me. There's a way to approach that very properly and explain it and move on. So that prep work that you can get from a mentor can help you work your words into your favor.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yvette, we only have a few moments left. Anything to add?
I will keep it short. I just want to say that in addition to being able to help you with mock interviews, the purpose of having a mentor is for them to share their experiences with you, right? Yeah. So I can tell you about various interviews that I've been on and try to help you bring your best self, that's what, and set you up for success. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Great. Thank you so much. And you guys have been wonderful today. I know that we're really close on time. We're going to pass this over to Kunal. Again, thank you so much to the mentor panelists for being available today. And Kunal?
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing your insights on this important topic that everybody is wondering about in getting prepared for remote interviews and succeeding. We're really excited to host this mentor panel to share those insights. A couple of final notes before we log off. I want to respect everybody's time here. If you have any further questions around interviewing or any other questions that you may have for the panel, given that their background now, feel free to raise your hand in the concierge, or we can make those connections for a one-on-one conversation. We are also hosting another roundtable session next Thursday. This is going to be hosted at 3:30 Eastern. The focus of that conversation is going to be about creating your digital portfolio to project your personal brand. So as you apply to opportunities, more and more opportunities are looking for your digital portfolio to help you stand out. So if you're interested in learning how you can create a digital portfolio, please join this conversation and gain insights from mentors who have succeeded in creating a great portfolio. With that, I'll go ahead and close this discussion out. For anybody who is listening to the recording, please go ahead and share this with your friends if they weren't able to attend. All right, sounds good. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Great talking with everyone.